Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my August reading wrap-up, and I honestly thought that I would get a lot more books read in the month of August, mainly because I was on a 3-week holiday from work, but also I was in lockdown, so I couldn't really leave my house, so I was pretty much just at home. So I thought I would have a lot more time to do a lot more reading, but unfortunately, yeah, I didn't. However, I was able to finish 3 books in the month of August, which I'm still proud of because at least it wasn't one or none. So without further ado, we'll get straight into this wrap up. The first book that I finished in the month of August was The Dragon Republic, and this is by Erik Kuang. This is also the sequel to The Poppy War. I did mention The Poppy War in my previous wrap up, and I also did an Illuma Crate unboxing for it, and also I've done a review for it. All these videos I'll link in the description bar below. You may or may not know already, I absolutely adore The Poppy War, and so I was really eager to dive straight into the sequel, which is this one. This beast is a chunker, and it actually took most of the month to get this one read, even though I had all the time in the world. Anyway, since this is the sequel to The Poppy War, I don't want to ruin stuff specifically plot-wise about the Dragon Republic. I did enjoy this one a lot. However, I still think that I liked The Poppy War over the Dragon Republic. This book definitely deals with Rin struggling, at least for the first half of the book. It's more of a personal kind of journey and struggle that she's going through because she's kind of adjusting to a different sort of role that she's been put under following the events of the Poppy War. She's sort of in this unprepared situation. There's more of a civil war going on in this book, and like I said, Rin is kind of dealing with some personal struggles as she made some really rash decisions in the previous book that kind of leaves her a little bit guilty, and she's kind of trying to repress the remorse that she feels of her decisions in book 1. I was really struggling to get through the first half of the book, mainly because she's so emotionally exhausted. She kind of goes down this path that I didn't really like. It's almost sort of wallowing in her self-pity a little bit, whilst also not being responsible for her actions. She's kind of just swept it under the rug, and she's trying to ignore it, but she's not really taking care of herself, and she's also not taking care of her, people that she's with. I don't want to get too specific. She's not in a very good state of mind, and so I couldn't really get by her decisions and her actions. I feel like she had a lot more control in the first one, whilst in this one she's kind of a bit of a lost soul, and she's again faced with a situation where there is a civil war kind of breaking out due to the events of what happened in the first book. There is this sort of power vacuum that has occurred in the Nakaran Empire where all these different warlords are trying to take charge, trying to overthrow and take control, and they're trying to rally the rest of the country to their cause. And so it's sort of a very divided sort of nation, and Rin kind of gets swept up. Obviously, she sides with the Dragon Warlord. However, does the Dragon Warlord have good intentions for the country, or is it more of a selfish sort of ambition he has for himself, more of an idealistic kind of vision rather than something that the nation really needs at this point? Rin and her kind of friends are wrapped up in, but she's just going with the flow. And so in this book there's a lot more kind of skirmishes and campaigns that these troops kind of go to. They're kind of at war with each other now, and there is once again this other foreign threat that may potentially ruin Nakara as an empire, but we're still kind of unsure about it. And so yeah, there's a lot going on in this book, and I feel like a lot of issues that I had with the first book kind of trickled down to this one. It didn't really improve. Some aspects did improve from what I wanted more of from the sequels, but again, I think the pacing of this book is again somewhat of an issue. Everything just kind of flies by, the plot flies through, and there's so many things that happen. I think I did mention this when I was talking about the Poppy War in the past. This book is more of a plot heavy story. It's not really going to focus on the characters and really flesh them out. I mean, some of them do, but most of them kind of get glossed over, and so Erik Kuang puts more attention to the plot. But for me, I do want a little bit more time spent on the characters and and I think that I do really like when stories kind of really focus on the characters. So when things do ramp up and dire situations do occur, you do feel more of the suspense, and you do kind of feel for what the characters go through rather than not fleshing out these characters that much. And so when certain things do happen, you're not feeling the impact and the emotions. My criticism are still the same with this book. Even though the pacing of this story is like really quick, there's so many different sort of plot lines going on. It's also very political, but again, Rin is sort of like a warrior, so she's not really involved in the politics either. She's basically a glorified foot soldier and kind of being manipulated. I feel like Rin, I'm so kind of disappointed with what I had imagined Rin to be. I thought that she was going to be a lot more of a intelligent and smart character. Although there are moments where she can be smart about her decisions, most of the time she allows herself to be manipulated by other people, and it's just so annoying. I'm like, come on Rin, come on, you can take control, but you know, use your power sort of wisely and not so brash and out of control. But out of control is what Rin is. So when she really hones in on her anger and rage, she just doesn't care what she does, and it's kind of sad. I honestly thought that Rin would be one of my new favorite characters, but unfortunately she really isn't, and I just get really annoyed that she's a bit dumb when it comes to figuring out what other people have planned for her, and she kind of figures out things pretty late in the game, maybe too late, and so she kind of then suffers the consequences of her kind of decisions, and it's very annoying to watch. But in terms of the story, I'm very, very curious now where the plot is gonna go from here on out. Oh my gosh, I feel like every book that I finish in this series, our main character's in a bit of a situation. She's really in a dire situation. I honestly don't know how she's gonna get out of her situation and kind of rise on top of everyone. In my opinion, I feel like the Poppy War, like this series in general, could have worked out if we got perspectives from other characters, but because we're just so stuck in Rin's head, I feel like Rin is just a very chaotic and erratic sort of person. We need someone a bit more grounded to have the perspective from as well. Because I'm not particularly enjoying her as a character, it's a bit hard trying to read from her perspective constantly, and yeah, it gets really tiring after a while. After a while, I just want to slap her and just say, wake up. It's a weird one. It's like, I do really like the plot and the sort of general direction that this story is going on. Rin does need a bit more encouragement when it comes to taking control of a situation, but also taking advice from more intelligent people around her that are also kind of loyal to her, rather than sort of listening to other people in power that quite obviously might have ill intentions for our main character. Well, not directly, but everyone else in power most likely have other intentions, more selfish actions, who are kind of playing the political game, so they're gonna be manipulating people, and Rin is one of those people that, you know, gets swept up in that sort of political game. It's just so annoying. I wish she was a bit more smarter, but you know, we do love to kind of follow her on her very tiring and just brutal, bloody journey. It is a journey. It is a journey that we go through with these stories. Maybe I'm not too supportive of a lot of the decisions from a lot of the characters in this book, but it does make for a very interesting story. I do keep mentioning this, but I don't really agree with a lot of Rin's decisions. However, she is the character that we're following, so we kind of need to get on board with her. And I must say that I did feel for her here and there, and I was rooting for her because she is definitely an underdog. I did really enjoy this story overall. Like I said, this book kind of deals with I'm kind of losing my voice, jeez. This book kind of deals with more of a civil war situation. There's a lot of different plot elements kind of coming together, sort of, as well as sort of introducing another potential threat. So I'm actually really excited to see how this story kind of wraps up and ends in the third book. I'm really hoping that Rin kind of steps up her game. She's no longer gonna get manipulated and controlled by other people, and she's gonna, you know, take control of herself and just be more of a responsible kind of leader and a good friend. Anyway, I ended up giving The Dragon Republic a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I would more so say it's on the lower side of the 4, maybe like 3.5, but I did still really enjoy this, and I do like where certain characters are going in this story. There were some things that got revealed in this book that I was really excited about, and so I can't wait for those things to kind of get more development and we like hear more about it, because I feel like there's still a lot of mythology that's wrapped up around this story that we don't really know much of, and I want to know more of that side of the story. Like, I'm so intrigued by the sort of magic and mythology of this world. I kind of need more of the fantasy aspects, you know? And I feel like we only get little snippets of it here and there, but we don't get full-blown fantasy. I kind of hope that the third book kind of escalates and really gives us the fantasy action that we're looking for in this. There are still so many different plot elements that are out there that we need to resolve in the third book, and so I'm really concerned about more so our core characters. Anyway, that was The Dragon Republic. I did really enjoy it, and I can't wait to get into The Burning God. But I will say I needed a bit of a break from the Poppy War series, so I might not pick up The Burning God for at least like 2 months, but I will get to it before the year ends, that is for sure. Oh my gosh, there's a piece of hair and it's really itchy. So moving on to the next book that I read. This is interesting. It's a poetry collection. This is I Said the Sea Was Folded by Erik Jensen, and it says love poems on the side. Oh my gosh, this picture is so adorable. This chihuahua, oh my gosh, so cute. Anyway, I feel like that this was a very sweet poetry collection. I think I found it, guys. I found one of my favorite sort of poetry collections. Maybe like modern day poetry doesn't really jive well with me, but as you can see, I've actually tabbed this book, and I never tab books. I can't really describe too much. All I can say is that this is a poetry collection. I think the author goes through like 3 different years in his life, snippets of his relationship that he has. I feel like this collection really works for me because it picks out like the very mundane sort of moments in life. It's more so very subtle, and like I said, the mundane sort of moments in everyday life, and I thought that it was really sweet. Again, not all the poems in this collection kind of worked for me, but there were a few that really did speak to me, and I just really liked them. I'll read some lines that I thought were nice. There's one called Two Sandwiches. I do like the last few lines. It says, "The child smelt of creamy blood." Oh my gosh, that About the first hour of a baby's life, the child smelt of creamy blood. It had not yet taken a drink of milk. Jen read that it lay like a god. For that hour before it was anyone's, I never thought of a god like that. I never thought of God as innocent. Gods create and creation is brutal. There's also a poem that kind of directly comes from the title of this collection. The line that I thought was very beautiful was, "I wrote that the grass was in seed and there was so much of it. The hillside seemed to blur. I wrote that the sky was low and perfect. I said the sea was folded." And there's also a poem called Forgiveness, and it reads, "The sun was too weak to set, and so it faded, until a minute before dark, the walls blushed pink. I wonder if you can decide to forgive, or if it just happens, and you only realize later because you no longer feel the other thing." And just certain like poems like that I thought was just beautiful and sweet. The daily kind of struggles or like moments that you feel something, and so I thought that this was a really nice collection and probably one of my favorite poem collections that I've ever read, and so I very much appreciated this, and I feel like I'll go through it and just read through it again, and it was just beautiful. It was short, it was sweet. I would highly recommend this poetry collection if you do want something that make you feel certain things, and I just thought that this was nice. I bought this randomly too. I think I gave this one a 4 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, so yeah, I might be more open to trying out more poetry collections in the future, but I'm glad I did read something that wasn't a novel. The last book I ended up reading in the month of August wasn't a physical copy. I actually read or like listened to an audiobook for the first time. I must say, after this experience, I realized that I would much rather read a physical copy copy. I'm more of a visual person, and so I do need to read words physically for it to process in my head a lot more. But I did walk my dog a lot during, you know, my holiday because that was the only time I could get out of my house. I ended up just listening to an audiobook throughout the month on my dog walks. Anyway, the book that I listened to in the month of August was The Trauma Cleaner, and this was written by Sarah Krasnostein. Is that how you say her name? This is kind of a non-fiction story following the life of Sandra Pankhurst, and I believe that this is an Australian novel. This story is a very dramatic story about Sarah Pankhurst. She's a trans woman, but she lives sort of this very kind of dramatic, I wouldn't say elaborate, but it's very intense. And I do think that some moments in the books were very confronting. It does deal with a lot of, you know, sexual assault, heavy topics like that. She works as a sex worker, and eventually she does become a trauma cleaner. And so it's kind of like a biography almost of Sandra Pankhurst's life. It goes through to her early childhood, how she grew up. She lived in a very abusive household, so that kind of messed her up, but she kind of lives through it. And so when you come to her in her present day life, she's kind of well put together and she's evolved as a person, and she kind of took control of her life. Although I will say that Sarah Pankhurst is not a very nice person. She deals with some horrific things in her life, and I kind of understand, but in a way she's very rude and just kind of not very grateful for a lot of things that occur in her life. Although I will say there are also so many things that kind of hit her in life that just really should bring down a person, but she's strong enough to kind of, you know, power through and just work through those hard-hitting life circumstances. And it's just so bizarre and so outrageous, and it's just so out there. She lives a very almost chaotic life, but it was really weird. And I don't read non-fiction a lot, and so this was my first one in like many years. Usually when I read a non-fiction, it's more educational. More times than not, it's probably about animals and nature, and so this was very different for me, but the way it read was very intriguing. I think the writing was very beautifully written, even though some of the subject matter that occur in the book can be quite triggering for people and very confronting, I should say. And so there are moments like that, but the way it's written, it's very beautiful. I will say that it's quite the journey. It's quite crazy what this one woman goes through in her lifetime, and I honestly totally did not know going into this book that it had that sort of crazy life story. I honestly went into this book thinking that it was about a trauma cleaner, and I thought that that was a very interesting job, and I thought it would go through the details of what that kind of job entails. And this book does go through a lot of that sort of grueling process of a trauma cleaner. I wouldn't say that Sarah Pankhurst is very passionate about her job, but she's really good at what she does and this business that she's made for herself. It's very interesting when she goes through like the trauma cleaning aspects. It's just a very sort of grimy sort of job. Some of the descriptions are very like disgusting, but I did really enjoy those aspects of the book. I mean, I did like hearing about the life story of Sarah Pankhurst as well, but what I, you know, bought the book for was to read about the trauma cleaning aspects, and I did get that, but most of the book was about, you know, the life of this one woman, and so that was really interesting too. I did enjoy this story, but it just wasn't what I expected. Even though I did get aspects of what I wanted from the story, I didn't really realize that it was about someone's life story instead of like, you know, their job. And so it was interesting. I definitely feel like it was very hard hitting at points, and like certain times during my walks, I was just like kind of in shock when certain things were happening, and I was like, whoa, like I need a minute. It was a peek into a world that is very different from a life that I'm living, and so it was a very enticing read. And it also was set in Australia, so a lot of the cities, suburbs and stuff that Sarah Pankhurst goes to in her life, it's like kind of familiar to me, and so it was very interesting because I never read a book that is set in like Australia. I think I've only read like 1 or 2 books that is set in Australia, Australia, and so it is really nice to hear like towns and cities and, you know, suburbs that I recognize and that I can kind of picture more clearly in my mind, even though a lot of the times it's set in the past. I ended up giving The Trauma Cleaner a 3 stars out of 5 on Goodreads. I did enjoy it, but there are a lot of elements that I just wasn't really interested in, but it was a really good insight into this one woman's journey, like life journey, and it was really crazy and really intense. At moments it was like really heartbreaking, but overall I went into the book with certain expectations and I just got all this other stuff that I wasn't really wanting. But overall, like, the writing was really good and the story was interesting, even though Sarah Pankhurst as a person isn't that great, although she has an incredible life story. She's a very let's just say unappreciative and rude sort of person, and she's very self-serving a lot of the times, but I kind of understand her. But at the same time, I'm like, she's not a particularly likable person as well. However, it was very interesting to see where she came from and how she ended up as a trauma cleaner. And I really did like the trauma cleaning parts of the book, but yeah, unfortunately, most of the book isn't about trauma cleaning, as the title suggests. And so I feel like I was a little bit, how should I say, bamboozled. That is it, guys. Those were the 3 books that I managed to read in the month of August. Have you guys read any of these books? What are your thoughts? Did you enjoy them? Did you not? Please let me know in the comments down below, and also let me know what you guys are reading right now and if you kind of recommend me any stories to pick up. Otherwise, I hope you guys are all staying safe and sound and happy reading. I will see you in my next video. Bye!